We here?
All right, we are live. Welcome to it, everyone. Before we get started, please make sure to like, subscribe, and say hello to us in the live chat. It is my pleasure to welcome LV Maldonado to the channel. And today we're going to be discussing a topic that's really near and dear to my heart, that of hearthkeeping and embracing the role of homemaker. And it was actually over the topic of housekeeping that I believe you and I first came into contact on X, and it's of course also where I learned about your blog, The Scribbling Homemaker. So let's jump right into it. I guess the first thing I would love to hear you kind of expound upon is, what are your personal feelings and your personal philosophy about homemaking itself?
I just feel like we I kind of came into it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
When I come from a working class background. And now I have to be nice because that's my husband right there. uh, uh, I came into the idea of it pretty late in life because I come from a working class family. Everybody worked,
Mm-hmm.
and um, honestly, if you had gone back and told my younger self that this was what I wanted to do, I was supposed to do, I would have laughed. Like my younger self would have laughed and never believed it and thrown it off and all that stuff. And it's like it's just interesting how things kind of evolve, I guess. But
Yeah, I mean, after all, what do our younger selves know? I mean, as you go through life and you start looking, you're like, wow, I thought I knew it all, and I knew nothing.
yep, don't we always think we know everything when we're that age?
Yeah, I sometimes wonder if we almost have to in order to give us, kind of that absurd confidence in order to take our first steps in life. But let's talk a little bit about homemaking itself. Kind of what does this mean to you, in your heart, especially since you didn't grow up with the expectation of being able to be a homemaker, just kind of what's the emotional core of it for you?
To me, it means um, being able to take a domestic, like taking care of the domestic problems, uh, not problems, like duties, I guess.
Hmm.
Um, I feel like in every marriage, I guess there's certain duties. There's you have to make money and you have to have do the domestic responsibilities like cooking and cleaning and managing the budget
Hmm.
and managing the home life. And if you can do both, if both spouses work, then both spouses have to do the split the domestic issues.
Oh,
But if
absolutely.
yeah, it's I always think of it as a partnership,
Hmm.
and I've come to believe that like we kind of have our own domains. Like,
Hmm.
he has his job, I have my job. Like, I mean, like I said earlier, me would have wanted to have a career, but looking back on it, I'm kind of glad that it things ended the way they did, ended up the way
Yeah.
they.
I hear you there. When I was working before, I always felt like I had three full-time jobs. The work I was doing outside of the home, the work I was doing in the home, and we're not casting aspersions on husband unit. He helped a great deal, but it's not the same. I did not feel like I was actually in charge and in presiding over my household in the way I wanted to be. And then, of course, I also had my spiritual role and the work that I was trying to do with my channel and outreach and all of that. So when I was able to leave that outside the home workplace, I was like, wow, what a relief. I only have two full-time jobs now. I was wondering if you had a similar experience yourself. It just kind of was like, oh, okay, I can focus now.
Yeah, that's exactly how it felt. Cause like, I tried to look for work back in the I've struggled with um finding work because
Mhm.
I'm on the autism spectrum, and that kind of has been a thorn in my side when it comes to the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And once I decided to stop focusing on career and start focusing on the things that I've been doing all along, you know, the stress went away. Like
Right.
it was like so much better. Like a huge relief off of both of us,
Mm-hmm.
because my husband, I kind of dragged him all over the place trying to find a career, you know. And once I just like took it back, I was like, it's not like I took a back seat. It's more like I was like, okay, I was already doing something valuable, and if I could just
Mm-hmm.
focus on that, um, I feel like that would be the best way to uh, be a partner in my relationship. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I mean it's all about teamwork, and the thing about teamwork is that it doesn't mean that you're doing the same things. I mean, if we looked at sports or even a team in the workplace, if everyone was trying to do all of the duties all at once, well, you wouldn't get very far. I mean, there's a reason why there's specialization and why there's not an expectation of how one person has to shoulder everything. It just doesn't make sense not to have some kind of division of labor. And of course, throughout history, more often than not, that has absolutely been the norm. It only took the 20th century and all of our bright ideas to really flip that on its head. But now I want to take this more in the spiritual direction because I know you are, one of my pagan sisters. You are certainly a person of spirituality and faith. So I'm curious about how your spirituality has informed your approach to your homemaking work.
Um, I guess I just feel like it was a way to like I was able to be more spiritual
Mm.
as in the home. Um, you know how we have the divine feminine and stuff like that, and
Mhm.
um, I've often felt like I mean, and this is a generalization. This isn't true for everybody. I've often felt like women tend to be a little more spiritually inclined
Mhm.
than men, and it makes a difference when you can be in the home and make it a sanctuary,
Mhm.
and take charge of stuff like that. Um, take charge of the energies within your home,
Mhm.
you know.
That makes a huge difference, and I know particularly in the Norse traditions, the lady of the house was essentially to be considered the de facto acting house priestess. It was very much her realm to make sure that the spiritual health and the energy of the home was that was one of her primary responsibilities. And I think you're right. I think there is I think it's because of the difference between male and female brains, with the female brain being a little bit more connected and seeing how all things affect all other things, whereas the masculine brain is a little bit more compartmentalized. And I think that is just one of the natural evolutions of how this division of labor actually develops.
Yeah, I like to think of it as, I know we're both Star Trek fans.
Yes.
Uh,
Proud nerd right here.
yeah, we, my husband and I, we have a Klingon marriage. Like that's how I see it, because the Klingons, they have their way, like the Vikings.
Hmm.
The men had their domain and the women had their domain, and if the man interferes with the woman's domain, she is well within her right to send him straight to Stovacor.
I just had a vision of General Martok and his wife. I mean, just especially
Yes.
that with that episode of when they were trying to arrange for Worf and Jensia's wedding. Just he was like, "I'm not gonna mess with the wife. I'm just not
Yep,
gonna do that."
exactly. He knows better. He knows better than to mess with her domain.
Yeah, and I think that does help when people just have something of their own of like, this is my ground and this is what I'm dealing with and what I'm doing, and I'm kind of the final say in this particular ground. And I think that that actually is very psychologically helpful, and it gives each person a dignity, I think. When you say, okay, you are in charge of this and I'm going to defer to you in this particular area. Has that have you found that to be true in your case?
Yeah, I feel like, because I've never gotten behind the whole, um, the man is the leader thing. Because I think that we both have our areas where we lead, you know what I mean? And, I've always kind of found that to be like a good arrangement, because my
Hmm.
husband and I are both pretty independent people and we don't
Right.
like being micromanaged. Neither one of us. It gets under our skin real quick. So we both learned pretty early on to like not interfere and to like defer to each other in certain matters, you know what I mean?
That actually leads up to one of the questions I wanted to ask, and definitely not prying, but I was just kind of curious about if there's been an overall good impact upon your marriage since you did take up homekeeping. Has establishing those boundaries actually benefited your relationship?
Yeah. I think it you know, we have a pretty good marriage now. Like in the beginning things were kind of rough, and I think it had to do a lot of we seem to be, um I don't want to say conflicting a lot.
Hmm.
We're trying to figure out how to deal with each other, you know. And since I decided we both decided, we have our own jobs, I feel like it makes things so much better.
Hmm.
And we communicate. We've always communicated pretty well, like he he can ask me like, can you get this for me or something like that, and I can ask him things, and like it's like a lot better than it was in our younger years when I was career chasing, I guess.
Hmm. I can definitely see that. So
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit more about the nitty gritty about what the job of a housewife actually consists of. It seems like everyone has their own kind of ideas and opinions about, what the range of duties are. So I would just like to have your own personal take on that.
Um, for me, my duties, I feel like, rely on providing the house, maintaining. So, like, my husband's job is to make the money, and my job is
Hmm.
to turn that money into a roof over our head and comfort, and
Hmm.
food. I take the money he makes and I turn it into uh, sustenance, basically. And I cook, I
Hmm.
do clean, but that also involves like organizing the house the way I want it to be.
Hmm.
Um, I do all the budgeting and stuff like that. Like I'm kind of like the person that works in the on the back screen or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, what you said, it kind of reminds me of this meme that I see floating around on X or Twitter or whatever we're calling it these days. But it said that, anything that you give a woman, she gives you more. You give her a house, she turns it into a home. A man gives her seed, she presents him with a baby in due course. I mean, there's something about the nature of women is that we take, the raw materials of everything we have around us and we make it into something more, and that infuses meaning into what the things originally were.
Yeah, I feel like that's my job to like provide the kind of sanctuary that my husband can come home and relax after
Hmm.
he's had a hard day at work. I mean, I know that kind of sounds a little 1950s ish, but that's how it is. I mean, and it's not just for him; it's for me too. I mean,
Yeah.
both of us. This like I feel like it's my job to provide comfort to everybody living in the house, including myself.
Well, and in this respect, I think the 1950s actually had the right view. The home should be that place where you relax, saying you went out there, you did all the stuff, and now your reward. Okay, video's back now. But your reward after doing all of that work is to come home and to be able to relax and to not feel terribly harried. And there's something nice about, of course, obviously you can. there'll still be dinner and cleanup after, the dude comes home. But still, I mean, the bulk of your work by that point is done by the time he gets home. And so both of you are a little bit more on that same page of, we can relax, we can spend time with each other. We can remind each other about why we do all of these tasks that we do. It's because
Yeah.
of each other.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice because when he gets home, I've usually finished putting dinner, like, I'm usually, like, serving it up, and, we get to check on in on we're both introverts, so we'll be like, we'll spend time with each other, like, ask him how his day was, and I tell about my day and stuff like
Hmm.
that, and then we go to our corners. I mean, that's we're introverts, but, like,
Hmm.
so it might be a little different for somebody who's not an introvert, but that's how we tend to operate. We come
Well,
home, yeah.
and that's the nice thing about, each individual marriage is that people can really tailor how they handle these things to their own personal needs and their personalities. And that includes the whole introvert versus extrovert thing. And, there's a considerable amount of freedom with this. So, what would you consider to be the most rewarding aspect of what you do? And also, what is the most challenging aspect of what you do?
The most rewarding would be just being able to basically be my own boss, like, and
Hmm.
being able to spend my day being creative. Like, I'm a very creative person, and it's not just about, like, cooking and cleaning. I just spend my
Hmm.
day writing.
Hmm.
And so I don't think it's, like, strict, like, if you're a homemaker, you're not allowed to make money or anything like that. I'm trying to pursue
Hmm.
writing as a blogger, and as a novelist and stuff
Hmm.
like that. Um, so I get to spend my day being creative, and I find that really, like, relaxing, and it, like, I don't know, and there is something about relaxing at the end of the day and after a home cooked meal that you made, after the chores are all done to the way you want them to, it's just, you know, it, it's work, but it's there's a meaning behind it when you're done with it. When
Oh,
you
yeah.
you know
You have something to show for it. I mean, I mean, because, when you go to a regular job, say an office, you have your tasks you do, you get them done, and that's all very good, and no one's yelling at you. But, it's going to be the same grind tomorrow, and no one will care. No one has any consideration. I mean, no matter how devoted someone is to their secular job, those aren't the people, and that's definitely not the company that's going to be, sitting at your bedside, at the age of 90, holding your hand. It's just that's not going to be how it works. Whereas when you concentrate your energies in the home, particularly with your spouse, that is going to be the person who's there, at these older ages, these vulnerable ages, and you're like, you know what, we made it, and we came through it together as a team, and that has so much more meaning.
Yeah, and I mean, the way I think about it, if I had ever been able to accomplish the careers that I wanted to when I was younger, I feel like I would have my creativity would have had to take a back seat to that, because it would
Hmm.
have been about spending the day working and then coming home,
Yeah.
and so I feel like I'd have to give that up to work. Yeah.
Yeah, and it would probably have an impact on your spirituality as well, because I know you did a recent blog post about kind of moral and ethical standards amongst Aztecs, which is a brand new thought for a lot of people who, because when they think of Aztecs, they only think about some pretty nasty human sacrifice that went on. They don't think about any other aspect of that culture, including stuff that is a bit more palatable to us in the modern day. And if you did not have the freedom to look into that and to explore that and think about it and internalize it, you wouldn't be able to bring that information to the world, and you certainly wouldn't be able to use it for your own well-being.
Yeah, the Aztecs actually, play a lot into my spiritual. I mean, they are my ancestors partly. I'm
Hmm.
mixed. I have all
Hmm.
kinds of stuff floating around in there.
Like a lot
But
of Americans
yeah.
these days.
But yeah, I've always kind of looked to them as my moral uh, guidance, I guess, because
Hmm.
they were very moral people. Like they believe a lot of the things, I covered in the blog, like about the things that um how should I say, like just they just believed in a lot of moral things. They would be very considered very based
Hmm.
back if they were around.
Oh, shout out to Gen Z, who I think gifted us with that particular expression.
Yeah.
So, we've kind of covered the things that you do find rewarding. What about the challenges? Because I mean, like with anything else in life, I mean, there are difficulties that are just inherent to the nature of what someone does. What would
I
you those things really be for you?
I think the biggest challenge would be um the struggle of trying to make things work on one income. That probably, especially in this day and age. Like um the thing is, like when you focus on the home, you realize you don't need as much
Hmm.
as you thought you did when you were career searching, I guess. But it can be a challenge living on one income because everything is just so expensive these days. Like,
Oh yeah.
so budgeting is a big issue with us. We have to be very careful with that.
Yeah, I'm sure for everyone listening and who happens to watch the replay, like, yes, that sounds very much like my own life. I mean, everybody's feeling the pinch these days. It
Yeah.
is definitely a scary time. So, let me ask you this, because you and we're both a genuine article. I think we're pretty grounded in reality, and I think from what I know of you, you take a very practical approach to what you do, both with your homemaking, your spirituality, and everything else. And I strive for that as well. So, I would describe us as the genuine article of homemakers, the real deal, people who are actually living this life. How would you describe the difference between, say, women like you and I, who are just taking this very grounded, practical approach to homemaking, and then the people we see portraying homemaking on social media? Because I feel like there's a big disconnect. So I'm very curious about your thoughts on that.
Like the trad wife types.
Uh huh. Got it in one.
um. Well, I mean, I feel like I don't know. Like it can be like there's this like idea this in this day and age where you have to. It's like you have to gain all this attention, I guess.
Hmm.
And I don't know, the trad wives, like, I have nothing against them, it's just that sometimes they make me think of the popular kids in the high school cafeteria.
That's an interesting observation. Go on.
Yeah, um, I feel like they all sat at the popular kids table, and, um, so now they think a lot of them think that they're, more inclined to tell. And I understand that in this day and age, feminism is kind of an it you know an issue sometimes. Without I don't want to be negative towards feminists, but
It does seem like it's a movement that has long since outlived its usefulness. The legitimate aspects of that, was already achieved. And the rest of it seems like a lot of people stirring up trouble to get influence and money, from what I can tell.
yeah. I mean, honestly, I feel like the feminists are pretty much the same way. The popular kids at the popular kid table.
Yeah, just a different click,
Yeah,
just a slightly different click of the same thing.
that's
I
pretty
did.
much yeah. That's pretty much what I see it like. They're kind of more similar than they are dissimilar. That's the thing.
Do you think some of them are presenting kind of an unrealistic presentation of what homemaking is, because that's the impression I get from a lot of them. I recently I saw something on Twitter. This woman said about how she spent 5 hours every day in the kitchen, and I was just gawking, like, what the hell is she doing?
Yeah, I think it's kind of unrealistic. Like a lot of them tout that they can do all this stuff handmade all the time, especially with kids and I'm like, yeah, but it does present kind of an unrealistic persona. I mean, like I I enjoy the fact that I'm home and have enough time to cook well, but
Hmm.
I'm not gonna I don't spend hours and hours and hours in the kitchen. There's other things I need to do. You
Yeah, and
know?
that was one of the first things that, well, okay, a couple things popped into my head when I first saw that. I thought first, okay, the bitch is lying. I do not believe her. Not at all. Because I
No.
thought, even if you did three, full meals a day, let's say you had, yourself, your husband, and three kids. Okay. Okay, okay. Let's say you made them breakfast. Well, scrambled eggs and bacon. I mean, that might take you 15 minutes, especially if it's a routine. Lunch, okay, you make some sandwiches. If you were feeling really fancy, you put them in the sandwich griddle and to make them pretty. Okay. I don't see how that's taking longer than half an hour. And let's say you had a old fashioned meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans kind of dinner. Well, it's going to take the meatloaf about an hour to cook, but everything else, I mean, it's just you're not. We're talking an hour and a half max. So I'm thinking, even if you're counting cleanup, that doesn't add up to any kind of 5 hours. And I thought, if you were doing that, when are you doing laundry? When are you taking care of the vegetable garden? When
Yeah.
are you doing anything else? I don't believe you're raising your children if you are doing, the equivalent of Thanksgiving dinner cooking every single day. It's just like, I don't believe you.
Yeah, I mean, and I know because my sister homeschools her kids, and she's ridiculously busy. Like,
Mhm.
I, I don't have kids myself, but I'm so busy. Like, there's
Okay.
not enough hours in the day.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know that feeling all too well. And your husband was left as a comment. He said, "That's how I feel too. Feels like propaganda, same as the girl boss CEO propaganda. Nothing's perfect. Got to do what works for you." And I think that's very sensible. I mean, real life. I mean, there's good days, there's bad days. I mean, there's days when everything's flowing, and then there's days when you say, "Dear, can we just order pizza?"
Yeah,
There have been events, and I'm not okay. And if I face one more thing, you might have to get bail money. I mean, I mean, there's, I just feel like, the trad wife thing, and for some of that stuff, I think it actually does cross over in the line of sexual fetish, just the way they present themselves. Um, none of it just really seems real. It doesn't seem very healthy. It just seems like I'm going to play house and put on this impression, but I'm not. But they've just missed the entire point of it, which is actually having a home, because I don't really see them as having a home. I see they have videos, but they don't have a home, in my opinion.
yeah. I feel like they've kind of missed the whole point. I feel like they're so uh concentrated on propping themselves up to other women, you
Hmm.
know. I think that they do it for other women, which I think
Like the
it's good.
popular girls.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
always they had to be in charge of all of the other girls.
Like the cheerleader types. You
Hmm.
know, we know them all back then.
Yeah, they haven't changed much. They just got a little bit older.
Yeah,
So I would kind of present them as an equally bad example as the people who act like the home doesn't matter at all. I really see them as the same sides of the same coin.
they really
So
are. Yeah.
let's talk about setting a better example. And in that vein, let's say you encountered a woman. She's just beginning her homemaking adventure. What kind of advice would you give her if she said, "Okay, you've been doing this. Help me find my feet." What would you tell her?
I would just say just to take things slowly and don't listen to anybody who judges you. Like, you know how you will learn how to do things.
Hmm.
You will learn your own routine. You'll learn what works and what doesn't work. You know,
Hmm.
and it's good to get advice from older people, but at the same time, um, you have to be make your own choices. What because what works for one person doesn't always work for somebody else.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. Especially when you think about just different family situations. I mean, you could be in your 50s and, and maybe you have a parent that's living with you. Well, you're going to have a different routine and different ideas of how to do something than, a girl in her 20s, who's, pregnant with baby number two. Yeah, there's going to be different management styles that are required for these different situations. And for people who don't have children in the home for whatever reason, just the flow is different. The kind of work is different.
yeah, it's always about the individual and their spouse and their family. It's always about them what is works in their lives. Like there's never I've never believed in a one size fit all situation.
Yeah. Me neither. I mean, that just isn't real life, is it?
No, it's like everybody has their own challenges. Everybody has their own beliefs, and you know we're all individuals in the end. And in a world that's so obsessed with like labels
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah, and yet it's the people who are obsessed with labels that I find they have the most vague, diffused idea of who they are, what they want, what they're doing, and it's the people who are just kind of going through life, with clarity and with purpose. They may not necessarily go out of the way to label themselves, but if they were pressed, they could tell you essentially, this is who I am and this is what I'm doing. But the label obsessed people, they can't begin to tell you. They can catalog things they think they are, but you try to get beneath the surface of that, and they just can't do it. Just psychologically, it is not there.
Yeah, and I feel like they're so obsessed with labels that they get like into the gatekeeper, like, okay, I belong here and you don't, type of
Hmm.
thing, because you don't check off all these boxes.
Yeah, never mind if those boxes are reasonable or even applicable to the situation.
Yeah, yeah, it's like everybody's gotta think that they're better than everybody else, I guess. And yeah, it
Well,
goes back to the cafeteria situation. They're all the same.
Well, and I think a lot of it shows the difference between someone who's trying to put on an affectation of confidence in themselves and someone who actually has genuine confidence. I mean, for you and I, someone said, okay, make us, your favorite dessert or your best dinner or whatever. We could do that probably without very much fanfare. But for someone who doesn't have genuine confidence in themselves and maybe talks about the act of cooking or the act of making their favorite dessert more than they actually do it, I could see how they could just disintegrate in that situation because it's not based on anything that's real. I feel like there's an authenticity gap that I think homemaking can provide people a way to close that gap and get themselves grounded, but it has to be genuine.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of people, like in this day and age, it seems like um there's this like competition among spouses that kind of conflicts.
Mm,
You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
instead of being a partner, like you should, that like a partner that complements each other. I feel like everybody's just like not only in competition with the rest of the world, but also in competition with their own spouses, I guess. It's kind of strange.
Strange and very sad. And I also think that's what leads to more shallow relationships. And also it leads to great insecurity. Because if you aren't complimentary of each other, there's going to come a point where you look at the other person, it's like, I have no idea what they need me for. I don't know why they're here. They could go at any time. And what about me? I might go at any time. And so you have this really unsettled kind of energy that is just hanging over people's heads all of the time, like the freaking sword of Damocles. And then, but no one wants to talk about that when they worry about divorce. About, are you actually bringing something to the table that helps the both of you go through life stronger together than you would apart?
Yeah, I think that, and I think a lot of it has. I wrote a blog a few like last month about marriage advice and stuff because I felt, I've my husband and I've been together for in February it'll be 21 years.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
congratulations.
and I feel like I've gotten to a point where I can have a little bit of wisdom, I guess, about what has worked in our lives.
He hasn't
So
run off, so something is
no,
working.
yeah, he's still here.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to have those kinds of experiences to reflect upon, because even though they're going to have their individual experience, like we've touched on before, but they might still be able to take away principles and ideas from other people's situations, and above all, to notice patterns about what things consistently seem to work for most people who stay married. And by married, I mean are actually in a marriage, and they're not just people who are strangers living in the same house who didn't bother to get divorced. Because when people talk about preserving marriage, I don't think they're talking about, kind of this legally bound but emotional estrangement. I think we're all aiming for something better.
Yeah, I think that my husband and I talked about like we're pretty lucky to have found each other, but finding each other was one thing. Relationships take work, you
Yes.
know, and
Both people have to show up for that work too.
yeah, like, and yeah, both sides, and when you realize that if one person isn't putting in the work, it's not going to work out. Like,
No, no.
it's just not, you know.
And it doesn't matter how many legal obstacles you put in the way of divorce or what kind of spiritual sanctioning you put on people. If someone doesn't show up, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, legal or not, they've or basically already divorced you in their hearts. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and then by the time you have an counselors or judges or anybody else, it's like this is done. It is absolutely done.
Yeah,
There's nothing really for an external influence to really accomplish at that point. I mean, the gods themselves couldn't keep two people together if they were that disconnected. It's not how reality works.
yeah, yeah.
Now,
Mhm.
speaking of the gods, do you have any particular deities or guardian spirits or ancestors that you strongly associate with the home and with homemaking as part of your spiritual practice? And does that also bleed into kind of the mundane routine of how you run your household?
Um, I I don't. I often don't really have like I'm still exploring what pantheons kind of work for me. I guess.
Hmm.
Um, I'm more of a seasonal type of like I'm in tune with the seasons. That's
Hmm.
kind of where my spirituality um lies with like,
Hmm.
you know, like I feel magic in the way that the seasons in way nature changes throughout the year, you
Yeah.
know. Um I do have a few I like uh Xochipilli. He was an Aztec prince god, and I like him only because I kind of consider him kind of a guardian because he was the ruling god of the day that I was born.
Oh,
So, yeah, it's like
okay. So
like a
there's a
zodiac.
connection. Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
connection there.
Um, he he was kind of a he's I guess you would if there was an equivalent there, it would be Dionysus. I don't know if
Hmm.
I pronounced it. Yeah, he was kind of a party god, But he was also the god of creativity. So
Mhm.
that works, you know.
And there's a lot of creativity that goes into making a home, even as something of, how you organize the storage closet or the manner in which you fold the towels, which, by the way, the lady of the house, her method is always the correct method for folding the towels. Just wanted to toss that out there for
Oh
any
yeah.
gentlemen who might be listening to us. But also, how she forms her routine, the order in which you take care of things, how you manage things, adjustments that you have to make, when life comes along and throws a monkey wrench in the works. I mean, there's, it's not a creativity in the sense of artistry all the time, although it can be when it comes to decor and things like that. But it is still very much part of that creative spirit of how can I take these ingredients and make it into something.
Yeah, and I do kind of lean towards creative type of gods, like Bridget.
Hmm.
Um, I think I told you before, like this Mabon season, I'm going to be focusing on Demeter.
Oh, yes, I do remember you mentioning that.
Yeah, so we'll see how that goes. Because I have a ever changing pantheon. Like it's never the same. So
Well, and I wonder if more and more American practitioners are going to be finding themselves in that boat because, we've talked a little bit about how a lot of us have a very mixed ancestry from different peoples. I mean, even, white as snow me, I'm still the descendant of multiple different European groups.
yeah, me
so
too.
so I mean, there's that, and then of course we're in contact with other pagans who have connections with other deities, and one thing I have found over the years is that it does seem that the gods from different pantheons are in communication with each other, because it seems like sometimes we're all put in each other's path at just the right moment for just the right reason, and connections are made that way. So it just seems to me like, I maybe eventually we'll have an American notion of our own pantheon, that in some way, I don't want to say combined because that isn't really the right word, but somehow incorporates all of the gods that our ancestors would have been familiar with, because that seems to be the natural way this is evolving.
Yeah, because I feel like there's like a universal connection between pagans and other natural spiritualities around the world,
Hmm.
like the Native American spirituality,
Hmm.
even Eastern religions like Shintoism.
Yeah, I've
Yeah,
always thought that they're kind of, I suppose, like close cousins in the family tree, if you will.
yeah. So it lends the belief that there was probably a like I don't know, are we all came from one group of ancestors who passed
Hmm.
these beliefs on, and they
Hmm.
took their own courses depending on where you were, you know?
Yeah,
But I
I,
feel
I've
like
I've been
it was centered, you know?
I've been coming to that conclusion myself a lot lately because I've been listening to these podcasts that did have been doing very deep dives on archaeology and symbolism and all related subjects from multiple different disciplines, and it does seem to point to there was in a more ancient, older civilization that came to its end through whatever means, and then the people who survived scattered. And of course, they took their beliefs with them, and that seeded other people groups, which is why I think that commonality exists. It just seems like that a pretty reasonable conclusion to draw at this stage based
Yeah.
upon information available to us.
Yeah, that's why when I say, because I also my spirituality has a lot to do with my ancestors, but when
Hmm.
I say ancestors, I mean all of the
Yeah,
ancestors. I
yeah,
mean, like my own ancestors, my husband's ancestors, everybody's ancestors. My
yeah.
husband, yeah, my husband's of Scandinavian descent, so he's got
Oh, okay.
some, yeah, so he's got some Viking in him.
Yeah, it's interesting in this country about how we're seeing just how we're all kind of meshing up together. I think that's going to be a really fascinating thing to watch evolve. It's a good thing we reincarnate. That way, various versions of ourselves will be able to watch and participate and be part of it all as time goes on. And that does relate to my next question for you is that do you think that the homemaking revival, because we are seeing it from multiple quarters, even from those who we consider bad examples, but what do you think this revival of importance placed on the home and someone taking responsibility for the home, how do you think that will impact kind of the broader pagan movement?
I feel like it will bring us um unity with others who are on the same path, I guess.
Hmm.
The same kind of whether whether pagan or Christian or any other beliefs, I feel like we're kind of evolving to a I want to say that we want to be more unified, I guess. Bring us
Or
more unity with each other.
at the very least have some common ground of saying, your home is important, your family is important, just having a spot where you're cultivating goodness is important.
It's about getting back to traditions that were lost, but you know, I feel like we had like a conversation before about like our ancestors, there aren't not everything we should be following, like the human
Mhm.
sacrifice may not be a good idea.
Yeah, I think we're all pretty well united in saying that's part of the past and it does not need to come back.
But there's a lot that the ancestors can teach us
Hmm.
about it that relate to even today, you know.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those instances where we want to be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as the old saying goes. We need to be able to take the good ideas and to be able to implement them for us. And I think as there's more emphasis upon the home and forming those ties, I think that's really going to expand pagan families in general and people viewing our spirituality as something that is both very intensely personal for the individual, but also something that on like the big occasions, like our holidays, that we can share with, the family, the community, and that we can have both. It isn't about choosing one or the other. It's about having having both in the way that it was probably always meant to be.
Yeah, I feel like, we can come like if we can come to a understanding with one another, and I think it could center around the home values and a return to like traditional values that, were enduring. I don't know. I think of when I think about that, I think of like The Hobbit. I mean, not The
Oh,
Hobbit, but Lord of the Rings, just the
yeah,
Shire, the
yeah.
Shire. Like
There
things
is
are
something about it.
yeah, things are meant to like endure in the Shire. That's what, it's like, and I think of those traditions.
I love that image because the image of the Hobbit hole and the home and what that represents to people. It isn't just a particular aesthetic, although it is admittedly extremely charming. But it seems like it's more for that for people, and that's such an influential story. And I think what it's really saying is that this is how home should feel.
Yeah.
I think people are really looking for that feeling, and with the hobbits, I mean, they, obviously they were prosperous and things, were well made. There was good quality, but all of it, it was without affectation. It was without ostentation. It was, we're focusing upon what matters and we're producing quality because it matters to us. We're not, no one's trying to show off, if you will.
Yeah, everybody's just doing their best, helping each other. Like I don't know. I want to say that maybe Hobbit values are where we need to go.
Well, and that's what Susan was saying is that the values of Hobbiton reflect in our own values. And I think that's a very fair observation. And I think it's why it resonates with so many people because Lord of the Rings is one of those stories that, I mean, for all that Tolkien, saw it as this very fundamentally Catholic work. I'm like, yeah, but, Catholics, you're kind of the of European paganism and early Christianity. So, you're at least half us. And I feel like that's really reflected in a lot of the cultural norms, particularly of the hobbits, of it's about people's connections to one another, their connections to the land. One of the reasons why the hobbits weren't, by nature as adventurous, with the exception of Bilbo and Frodo, is just because they had it made. They had that which people are meant to aspire where they were. And when you are genuinely happy and content and you have purpose and meaning, you're not having to go all over the place to try to find a way to fill up that hole.
Yeah, and I think it creates a sense of uh, um cherishing that life. Like,
Yeah.
you know, Frodo, he did what he did because his way of life was in danger.
Hmm.
You know, like I think that that's a good thing. Like, you're willing to, if it's a kind of life that you're willing to fight to preserve. You know.
Is that one of your own motivations? Because you're very outspoken on X, and you're very outspoken on your blog. Does that also feed into you, just kind of the spiritual of the culture from which I spring, the spirituality from which I spring? It's under threat, and so despite being an introvert, I must go out and do these things. Is that
Yeah,
pushing you?
it's interesting because I've always been pretty shy. Like, anybody who knows me knows I'm extremely shy. But I don't know I if it's being on X that's drawn it out of me, but or maybe it's turning 40 that draw that kind of changed. Because I don't know if there's some kind of rule of when you officially turn 40, you stop caring about imagery anymore, or how people think of you anymore, and you just have less control over your mouth, I guess.
I hear that gets even more pronounced after you turn 50, and I'm looking at 50 with some alarm because of, like, gosh, I'm going to be biting people. That's what the future is. I'm going to bite people.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I guess recent events have kind of inspired me. I've always been inspired to write by what I see around the world because I'm a very written person and stuff like that. But I guess I feel more inspired to be more open about things now than I used to
Mhm.
be. Yeah.
And your husband gifted us with a very good Bilbo quote. It's no bad thing to celebrate a simple life. How true that is, and and at the end of things, especially as you get older, you start to realize how simple the things that you actually desire really are.
Yeah, it's really, I don't know if, I grew up in the working class. So I never really valued material things, I guess. But even as I get older, I value them even less, if that makes any sense. Like,
You
fancy
have them in their
cars.
place. Yeah.
Yeah, like I see on X sometimes, like earlier somebody posted, like, would you rather have a fancy car or a mansion or a boat or something? And I was like, none of those appeal to me, like, at all, like, even a little bit. Because I don't know if I and this is legit. If we won the lottery, all I'd want to do is get a nice place in the forest with my family, and that's
Hmm.
it, and give the rest of the money away. That's what I would want to do. As long as we have enough to, like, be comfortable in the life that we
Hmm.
want to live, like that Hobbit inspired life. That's all I really want, I guess.
That's such a beautiful thought, because I really think in that story, it was with the hobbits that you actually saw contentment. the kind of a lasting happiness. They knew they had it made. Even if you might not have been able to articulate it, they wouldn't have necessarily thought of it in those terms. They knew that this was it. It really was it, and it would be wonderful to see more people get onto that kind of line of thinking. So,
Yeah.
before we go, I want to invite you to share any kind of final thoughts you have on the subject of homemaking. If you have anything else you'd like to share, I just want to kind of open up the floor completely to you.
Um, I just want to say that whether I think it's important that young women have an expectation, like really think about what they want in life,
Mm-hmm.
because um, you know, real feminism is about choice, not about being a girl boss or not being a girl boss. It's about choice. And unfortunately, we don't always have as much time to make that choice as men do. That's just the truth of it.
Yeah. Any
So,
complaints? See Mother Nature. She arranged it.
yeah, so I think it's just important that young women really think about what they want in the future. You know, it could be it like I said, it's all about being an individual in the end, but
Mm-hmm.
still, it's important to be realistic too, you know?
Absolutely. So, on that note, tell people a little bit about your blog and what they can expect if they decide to follow you on X.
Well, if they follow me on X, I'm very, very, salty. I'll give it on there. I'm way different than I am in real life, although, you know, I'm getting older, so we'll see how that goes. Um, on X, I do tend to talk about politics a little, maybe a little more than I should, but, I on my blog is about homemaking from a pagan perspective, and it's about writing, because that's the other thing I do is I'm a writer, and so um it's all about reaching out to young women and teaching them that you know that this isn't such a bad course of life if that's what they want.
Mhm. You don't have to hang your head in shame if you don't have to be, embarrassed by your own desires.
Yeah, I mean, if I mean, like, there's nothing wrong with being a girl boss if that's really what you want, but there's nothing wrong with being a homemaker either. I
Mhm.
think that's the biggest message. Like,
And they might also be surprised about how often some of the traits you might associate with girl boss actually come into play when you are truly taking the reins of your household.
yeah, I think that's the other thing. I want other women to see um how amazing of a life it is. It's not. I think people equate it to being a servant or something like that. That's not it at all.
Mm-mm, not by a
That
long shot.
Yeah,
And
it
woe betide the man who tries to turn his wife into a servant. Woo-hoo-hoo.
yeah,
They
I
tend to
mean,
get what they deserve.
yeah, exactly. Like, it's being in control of your own home and doing something that you'll more likely to be remembered for than being a girl boss. That's just
Oh, it's 1,000%. And I just want to thank you for being willing to come on here and to have this conversation with me and to be one of the voices who is, restoring the honor of the housewife and acknowledging it that this is work. This is absolutely work, and it is well deserving of respect. So I am really truly grateful because I mean it's one thing for me and to talk about this on my channel. I once upon a time I did a whole series called The Pagan Housewife, but I'm just one person. So people could absolutely get the impression of like, well, that's just Brigantia. And well, yeah, what does Brigantia know? But when you come on and when other people have the courage to speak up and say these things, I think that has a pretty big impact of saying, maybe these ladies are on to something after all. So
Yeah.
I am truly, truly grateful to you. Everyone, if you want to follow her, you can find her on X or on her blog, The Scribbling Homemaker. I have links to both in the description box below. She's well worth a follow. And let's see if we can't get her to be a little bit more visible and antagonize all the right people. But thank you, everyone. And of course, if you would like to talk to either of us more, you are very welcome to join the Oak and Elder Witchery. It is on Gilded. You will have to make an account, but once you have that account, you can go right into the group and you can start making connections with other pagans and witches. So thank you, everyone. And we will see you all next time.
All right.
All right. And